Welcome to Slope from a Standard Form of an Equation. After the screencast, you should be able to find the slope of a line written in standard form. First, let's quickly go over the different forms of linear equations. The most popular tends to be slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b, where m represents your slope and b represents your y-intercept. Some examples: y equals 1/2 x minus 7, and y equals negative 3x plus 4. One reason that this form is so popular is because it is easy to look at the equation and tell right away what the slope is. So in this case, respectively, the slope is 1/2 and the slope is negative 3. Another popular form, my favorite form, is point slope form. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Again, m represents slope, and x1, y1 represent a point on the line. So as we look at our two examples, again, it is easy to look at the equation and know that the slope of the respective equations are 1/4 and negative 2. And then there's standard form. Some people like standard form because it's easy to write. However, it is not as easy to just directly tell what the slope is. So let's look at how we might approach this. If we want to know what the slope of 3x plus 4y equals 24 is, what I think we should do is solve for y. When you solve for y, you're going to get it in that y equals mx plus b form, and then you can tell what the slope is just by looking. But when we solve, we are actually going to solve. When we solve, we want to brainstorm or develop a plan before we put pencil to paper. We're going to consider the three questions. What is the variable? What operations are being performed on the variable? And what are those inverse operations? Let's take a look at 3x plus 4y equals 24. What is the variable? There's 2. What's the variable that we're solving for? We're solving for y. So keeping in mind that we're solving for y, what operations are being performed on y according to the order of operations? Well, there's an addition and there's a multiplication. According to order of operations, we're multiplying by 4 first, and we're adding 3x. So what are those inverse operations? In the reverse order, first we're going to subtract 3x, and then we're going to divide by 4. And the third step is the most important, because that tells you exactly how you're going to solve the equation. We're going to subtract 3x, and then we're going to divide by 4. So let's see what that's going to look like. Job number 1, subtract 3x. And when I do that, I subtract 3x from both sides. On the left, we've got 4y. On the right, these are not like terms. They cannot be combined. How I write it, well, I want to mirror that y equals mx plus b. I want the negative 3x to be first, and I want the positive 24 to be second. So that's going to look like negative 3x plus 24. Our next job, divide by 4. What you do to one side, you do to the other. As I simplify the left-hand side, that's y. On the right-hand side, this is not looking like slope-intercept form. What I need are two distinct terms. So I'm going to use my rule of fractions and separate. We'll have negative 3x over 4 plus 24 over 4. Simplify your fractions for y equals negative 3x plus 6. Going back to our initial question of what is the slope, now that we've solved for y and put it into slope-intercept form, y equals negative 3/4 x plus 6, which means that our slope is negative 3/4. Let's look at our other equation, finding the slope of 5x minus 2y equals 10. We're going to solve for y to put it into slope-intercept form. And we're going to follow our brainstorming or developing a plan when we solve. So what is the variable that we are solving for? We're solving for y. What operations are being performed on y? Well, we're definitely multiplying by -2. But what are we doing with the 5x? That 5x is positive. Positive means we are adding 5x. So when we undo or look at our inverse operations, first we subtract 5x, and then we're going to divide by -2. Again, that third step is very important because it shows us exactly how to solve the equation. What we're going to do first is subtract, then divide. First job, subtract 5x from both sides. On our left, we've got -2y. On the right, again, these are not like terms. They cannot be combined. And I want to follow the model of y equals mx plus b. So the -5x goes first, and then we're adding 10. That 10 was positive, which is how I know we're adding. Our next step is to divide by -2. So we'll divide both the left and the right by -2. Our left side simplifies to y. I'm going to use rules of fractions to have it mimic that y equals mx plus b form. So we have -5 over -2x plus 10 over -2. When we simplify our fractions, we will get 5/2 x equals, y equals 5/2 x minus 5. As we look back, when we solved for y, we got y equals 5/2 x minus 2, which means our slope was 5/2. Now, you may have noticed a pattern. If you did, when we were looking for the slope of 3x plus 4y equals 24, that slope was -3/4. What was the slope of 5x minus 2y equals 10? That slope was 5/2. Now, these numbers are appearing more than once. I see the 3x plus 4y. My slope was -3/4. I see the 5x minus 2y, and I see that we've got 5 and 2. So my x's, the coefficients with the x's, are kind of showing up in my numerator, and the coefficient of my y's are kind of showing up in my denominators. But when I look in my first equation of 3x plus 4y, those were all positive numbers, but my slope was negative. In the second equation, I had that -2, but my slope was positive. So something is going on with those signs. So basically, if you were noticing a pattern, it turns out that there is one, and we have a rule for slope when you're looking at equation in standard form. And it has to do with the coefficient of the x and the coefficient of the y. The rule for slope is it's going to be the opposite of the ratio of a to b. So as we look up top, we had our a coefficient was 3, our b was 4. We took the opposite of 3 over 4. For the second equation, it was 5 over -2. So we had the opposite of a negative is positive, 5 over 2. Let's take a look at 2 more examples. As we're looking at 2x plus 7y equals 28, that slope is going to be the opposite of 2 over 7, the opposite of a over b. As we look at our next example, 8x minus 4y equals 13, our slope is going to be the opposite of a over b, or 8 over negative 4. When we simplify, our slope is 2. If you did not notice the pattern, or if you think the pattern is hard to remember, that's fine. You can always solve for y. Either way, in this screencast, we hope that you have learned how to find the slope of a line written in standard form.